And by a minute, I just meant like 20 seconds, or maybe less. Nope. Hold on, it's saying I'm offline right now. Oh, there it is. Hmm. Are you guys seeing any video right now? It's looking blank for me. Ah, there we go. All right, so that is, I think that pretty much covers the majority of the interface stuff. Actually, there's one more thing, and I wish I had put this on the other one. Customizing your interface. So, actually, two things. In ZBrush, sometimes you just want to kind of start over with everything. You don't like the work that you've done. Rather than restart ZBrush, you can just go to Preferences, Initialize ZBrush, and it will fully initialize everything and delete all the stuff that I've done, clear my history. It might take a little while to kind of clear the cache on everything. But yeah, so now it actually goes to my default background. This is the default background with ZBrush. I actually don't like the gradient, so I always go to Document, and I change the range to 0, and that gives me just a full... This is basically the gradient thing. You can actually change your background color, too, to whatever you want, just by clicking on it and doing this. But I don't want that. I'm just going to leave it at this kind of light gray. But yeah, so to customize your interface, just want to go up to Preferences, Config, and do Enable Customization. It kind of pops this thing up. And you can pretty much dock stuff anywhere that you want. So you can see I have like my lighting is docked here. I have backface mask, which basically allows me to sculpt really intensely and not have to... it makes it that it won't sculpt through the back of something. I have different views, a couple brushes here. So all that you do is you find an item that you like, that you want to use. Let's load a Z tool first. Do a different Z tool for this one. Something from Ribbon. So let's go with the Work, which is a character that I had just started working on. So again, drag it out, hit T, and then I hit F to frame it. I'm going to switch to my Y up axis, and so yeah, so now I have this object here. Say that I really wanted to store, let's see, group split. For some reason, I'm going to use that a whole bunch. Well, now that since I have enable on right now, I can. Oh, hold on. I think it is Control Shift. Let me see. No. Control Alt. Yeah, Control and Alt allows you to grab anything from any menu and just dock it wherever you want. So I have, you know, I have some space down here. I could dock it up here if I wanted to. There's all these different modules. I can create a new little space here that if I wanted to. I could dock it to this bar if I wanted. Let's do that. If you want to get rid of it, you just kind of drag it into the window and it'll just sort of delete it. So that's all that I did for everything here. You know, like you have to go through the brush menu to get some of these. So say I want like the clay tubes I want to do down here. So I go to clay tube with Control and Alt. I can just dock that right down here with everything else. And once you're done, you're just going to want to go up to undo enable customization and do store configuration. So now every time I open ZBrush, this clay tubes brush is now going to be down here. So that's pretty useful. So I'm actually going to close ZBrush and reopen it though, so it's just to show that that worked. All right, it's going to take a second to reopen. So I'm going to spend maybe another 20 minutes to 30 minutes on just some of the ways to just get started in sculpting with ZBrush. So we've already seen how to import OBJs in. So the next thing would be using Dynamesh. So Dynamesh it's not technically a voxel-based sculpting, but it is pretty much what it says. It's a dynamic mesh system. And you can actually technically convert any of your objects to a Dynamesh object. So I'm going to start with this Dynamesh 16 because it's kind of low resolution. It's a good illustration. So I just double click on this. We get this scene. So it's just a polysphere. If I hit Control F to look at the wireframe, you see it's kind of a regular wireframe, but you've got a couple triangles in here. It's a little bit oddly shaped. One second. And I can just start sculpting on this. I'm going to do kind of a face. I have X is on by default for this scene. So let's just pull the chin down. Kind of pull the face out. It's going to be kind of an alien face. Head in, maybe I'm going to go to hit P just so I get sort of a non-deformed view for now. And you can see, just like in any modeling tool, polygons start to get stretched out a little bit. And let's like build like a really big ear or something into him, like a bat ear. So I'm gonna pull this out really far, maybe like a weird Yoda ear or something. You can see it just starts to break down. But with Dynamesh, we can fix that on the fly just by holding down Control and dragging like you were doing a mask, and you can see it remeshes everything. So I can undo that and redo it, and you can see what it does. So each time you hit Control drag, it's going to update that. So if I start sculpting with my clay brush, kind of do those ears, I'm actually going to use my inflate brush too, which basically just balloons whatever you click on, just so this has some depth to it. And let's hit Control drag again. And you see, it kind of just keeps updating. So this is a pretty low resolution mesh right now. So we're not getting a lot of detail. Sorry, once I start sculpting, I have trouble stopping. But yeah, so I'm just going to show that you can build up forms real quick. Just using the clay brush right now. You know, this is going to look pretty weird, but I'm going to actually smooth this in and pull them in just a little bit, because I'm not liking how that was looking. Pull our chin forward a little. Use a snake hook to kind of pull a neck out. Maybe move that neck forward just a tad. Forehead should probably come out a little. Okay, so we've got this shape going, and now I'm ready to go up a subdivision. I'm not going to do it the normal way. I'm not going to hit Control D because that's going to add subdivisions. I don't want to do that. I'm just going to up the resolution. So to do that, I want to go to Geometry, and I'm going to go to the Dynamesh drop-down. And you'll see this is already turned blue, and I think probably if you're using the default version of ZBrush, it's probably yellow. I've customized my... or no, I think it's orange. I've customized my menu system a little bit too, and that's another... There's a whole different way to do that. So right now we're set at the lowest resolution, which is 16. I want to go up to... Usually I'll just double it, so I'll go to 32. And now... I think you usually have to actually sculpt a little something to get it to work. Yeah, so now we double it. So we can turn that off for a little bit, and we'll just get in and start sculpting out some muscles in here. Maybe connect that head with something. Give him a little bit of a... so I'm just going to use the clay tube to sort of get some shoulders out. You can see very quickly you can rough in a whole big shape. So this is where I'm going to turn on my back face masking, so I don't get that. So now if I sculpt from underneath, you see it doesn't pull through. So let's just try to fill these forms out a little bit. Work on, get that muscle in there. Maybe redefine this ear just a little bit, or maybe I could even turn it into a horn. Oop. I keep hitting it too fast. PCB. Okay, there we go. You can see very quickly you can start building up a lot of shapes. I'm going to go to my mask lasso tool and just kind of do a big move on the head, kind of move it back a little bit, show you how that can work. I'm going to by hitting control click on the thing, you can see it softens my mask. Pull it back just a touch. Actually, with this set, I'm going to actually pull this down just a little bit. And then I could even scale it up if I wanted to. And move these back. So there's a lot of different ways you can really manipulate things really quickly and easily. And you'll see, it just kind of keeps updating everything. And then when I'm done, you know, I can hit 64 now. I want to get a little bit more resolution in here. And on that. So now we see we have even more. And still using all the same brushes I've been using. But it remains dynamic. It allows me to keep kind of... And you can see, another reason that I really like the clay tube is that it leaves these nice unclean kind of bits all over the model, which I think can kind of actually be sort of inspiring. It kind of gives you a little bit of texture to work from. Makes things feel a little bit more organic than just using the smooth. You know, skin has a lot of irregularities in it. Kind of give him sort of a very well defined, like he's got a skeleton kind of trying to bulge out of there. Yeah, skin has a lot of irregularities, so it's kind of nice to just, this brush sort of gives you some of that for free, just while you sculpt. A little pig nose. Again, obviously this is a weird creature, but I'm still kind of thinking of human anatomy and just general skulls that I've seen and how those things kind of function. And just sort of exaggerating them. Again, this is not really necessarily about sculpting, but it's just about showing you sort of the techniques that we can use. So, I've got this weird head. Again, I want this form to kind of come back in a little bit, maybe. But this head has terrible topology right now. It's doing the trick for what we want right now, and that's great, but the topology is pretty funky. This is definitely not something that we could animate or rig right now at all. So, a couple of different options here. We can use Zremesher, which is built directly into ZBrush, or we could export this into TopoGun. And when you're trying to make like animated meshes, that's what I would recommend. I've been doing a lot of artifact sculpting at work this year, and for that, a lot of the time Zremesher gets you the whole way there. So if you just want something that just is like, I don't know, just it's just like a set piece kind of. It's not necessarily going to need to animate. It's just going to like sit on a desk somewhere. You know, maybe it's like a pencil or like a stone or something, or you know, something where the actual edge loops and flow of the topology doesn't really matter all that much. Then Zremesher is actually can be a really fantastic solution. And so let's show you both of those two things. So first thing I'm going to do, which I like to do a lot of the times, it's sort of similar to saving a new version. I will duplicate this and move it down. So number 2. 1 is just going to be the thing that I keep working on and keep that as an active geometry, active Dynamesh. For this one, though, I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to go to Zremesher and hit solo. Let's just see by default what it does. Okay, so that's actually not too bad looking. I mean, it's higher res mesh than we would really need. But I mean, even this you could probably rig. Like, there's a lot of overkill topology here right now, but it's very, very evenly laid out. You could rig this. Like, this would deform pretty decently. Oh, and that actually, I can show you a really cool thing you can do with that. If you hold Control with transpose on an object and drag it up, it'll actually mask things. And then you can actually do like some posing in ZBrush. So with this masked, I can do like some rotation and maybe I'll turn this off. that, and so you can do a pose that way, which can be kind of cool. And then just kind of rotate the whole thing. So now we have this posed kind of head, which is already more interesting than what it was before. The only thing with this is now that it's posed, it is not symmetrical anymore. To select the inverse of a mesh, so if you're masked, you just hold Control and click off of it, and it'll do the inverse. You can also go to the masking menu and click inverse. But Control tends to be the toggle. So like, let's see, let's do group auto group. So now we've grouped visible basically. So if I've Control Shift clicked this to isolate that, Control Shift dragging will be the opposite. So it is kind of confusing. So it's drag, I think, for this, but then for masking, it is just clicking. We'll invert it. I wish, just as much as you did, that it was the same, that it was clicking was the same thing no matter what, but it is dragging for polygroups, and it is clicking for masking. And I've gotten so used to that that I don't even think about it, but now that I think about it, that is kind of dumb, but that's how it is. Okay, so we can keep Z-remeshing. So say, all right, this is pretty good, but we wanted, this can be really good too for prop pieces when you have a very specific poly count requirement, because you can always just go into target polygon count and change this to whatever you want. So say this had to be a 2,000 poly object, and that's our limit. I can just set this to 2, and this is by thousands. Each of these numbers is 1,000. I can hit Z-remesher and see what we get. So it's a little bit lower. So you'll see that it didn't quite go to 2. And active points is not the best indication of poly count. You actually want to hover over the object and wait, and you'll see here polys 2,559 polys. And by polys, it is referring to actual triangles. Even so, it would actually be half of that, I guess, for the quad poly count. So the reason that it didn't go lower is because we have this thing adapt turned on. Adapt density will basically say, what it's basically doing is I'm going to target 2,000, but if I think that if the algorithm thinks that like going all the way down to 2,000 is going to just lose too much of the basic form, and it's probably determined by like the angle and stuff like that of everything. Then it's basically not going to go quite that low. It's going to be like, oh, I can go, I think, to really about 2.5 before I have to really start destroying the mesh a little bit. So if that's the case, I can always turn adapt off, and it's actually going to give me a count of 2,000. So you can see we've kind of lost some of the form a little bit. But the nice thing is with this saved, well, we posed it, so that's kind of screwed everything up. So let me delete this real quick. We'll run it again on this. We'll duplicate this, move it down. Turn Dynamesh off and hit Z-remesher at, we'll do 3 for this. Oh no, let's do 1. Let's go really low. Let's see what we get. Okay. So now I can subdivide the mesh, hitting Control D. And I have this high resolution one that I've sculpted out that has some nice extra detail on it. But I've lost, you see it's really smooth here. So since these two objects are perfectly on top of each other, we can do something that is the exact same thing as the wrap deformer that we did in Maya earlier this year. I can just hit project, and it will, there you see now, there's almost no difference between these two. So it's projected everything. And it's based on proximity. So like if I were to, move this way out of the way, the proximity is gone, so projecting, oops, delete. So projecting is actually going to break everything. But since I didn't move anything, I just subdivided. Now I have basically a subdivision level thing set up that has the projection from this. One other thing that you can do within ZBrush is decimation. So that can also be sometimes a good option for something that you don't want to actually animate at all. It's just going to be a set piece. Again, a stone or like an environment piece, like a tree can be a good example if it's like a tree that's just background and not going to be swaying too much or anything. So I'm going to duplicate this again.
And for this one, I'm going to go up to my Z plugins menu. I'm going to dock that over here, and I want to use Decimation Master. So I'm going to open that up. Things you want to think about are freeze borders, so that'll keep, like if you had holes in this, it'll keep those borders the same. If you had UV layout, it can store your UVs, so if I've already painted textures for this and I wanted to decimate it, I can keep those UVs and not have to redo it. And then use and keep poly paint. That'll basically reproject all my poly paint, which I have not done any of today. So the two things you have to do, you have to pre-process the current model. Since this is a pretty small model, that only took a second. And then you do what percentage of decimation. And again, you have the option to set a specific number if you want to. So we could say this needs to be 0.5 polygons, which is going to be a really massive decimation. But we have a lot of extra topology here that's not doing much, so that should work. So let's do decimate current. Okay, so that's pretty low. It's 1,000, so which that actually means fewer triangles. But for this, you see, it's what Decimation Master is doing is it's really trying to focus primarily on the silhouette of the object from every angle. So I can undo that, and let's just set it to something more reasonable by like 5% or something. Do decimation. So this is not an animatable mesh, really. It would still technically deform. Anything probably will technically deform, but, you know, it's not ideal. And you're not going to want to sculpt on this anymore, because if I subdivide this up and start sculpting, you'll see triangles are really bad. In ZBrush, you start getting stuff like this. Things just stay really noisy, even when they're smooth. So you never want to really have triangles when you're sculpting. But if you've already finished the mesh and you're just like, I just need to show this model as a render, decimation can be a really great way to get a very specific poly count. So that is another option. I don't think I'm not gonna be able to get to Topogun today. I think I'm gonna wrap it up here. There definitely are more things to think about. There's poly paint, which I could do a whole video on at some point. I might, possibly tomorrow, I may end up just streaming for an hour or two of just a character that I've been working on, the Wark character, which is a creature from Starry Expanse project that I'm working on right now. No guarantees yet. Keep an eye out for it. If you're subscribed to me, then I think you'll probably get an email notification when I go live. And if I go live, I'll probably be going for like an hour, couple hours. But yeah, if there's no more questions, okay, let's see. How do you UV? All right, so UVs. There is an automatic UV feature. I don't use it very frequently. Sometimes I do for really simple shapes, but it's another Z plugin. I usually do my UVs in Maya and then do the import process. So like, let's see. I can use the head example that we have. I think it's in Maya, scenes, example files, female head. Okay, so you know this head by now. I'm actually going to split this by poly groups. Group split, because I wanted to get everything else out of there. So I have this head, and first way to know, yeah, that's no problem. I'm happy to go over it. You're going to want to find the UV map thing here. So the fact that this is active and not grayed out means that there are already UVs on this. I can delete those UVs, or I can just check what those look like. So ZBrush actually does this really cool animation, so I'll show you what that looks like real quick. So if I click Morph UV, it flips the whole model out into, and you can still see it in wireframe if you want. You can rotate around it. See it in perspective. It's pretty neat. If I click it back again, it goes right back to it. So the UV map size, this just has to do with once I start exporting normal maps and stuff out of Maya, it'll do it based off of what this size is set to. Although now I usually use this plugin that comes with ZBrush, which is the multi-map exporter. So I do it all through there, so you can actually reset your map size there too. Multi-map exporter is great because you can also do vector displacement. You can do normal maps, ambient occlusion maps, cavity maps, a bunch of stuff that ZBrush did not initially have by default. So anyway, say that say that this was not UV'd and I needed to import the UVs. So actually I can just do that. Let's just delete these. So now you see everything's grayed out. There's no UVs or anything. I can now import that same model. Since I've not moved this or sculpted this, I can hit import female head. And you can see it brings all that extra stuff in that I didn't want before. So I gotta, because typically you would just import the head, not all this other stuff. So splitting it out again. So now you'll see though that I have UVs back. So it just pulled the UVs from that imported object. Say I don't have any UVs yet, and I just want to do them in ZBrush and just forget about it. I just want to do an auto UV. Then I'll go to UV Master. Again, delete my UVs on this. So I have a couple different options. I can do symmetry, which I would recommend for something like a face. But it's going to pretty much just do it. Let's just see what it does by default. I'm going to hit unwrap. Should be pretty quick. Small object. And then let's hit morph UV. See what we get. So it's cleanly laid out, but you see we have this big seam right across the face here, and that's not really ideal. So let's go back. Yeah, you can see it kind of cuts it across here. A good way to actually visualize that is I could like, let's see. I think I can auto group these. Oh no, that'll group everything. That's messed up. Never mind. Back. Okay, so that's not ideal. So I can do control painting. I can do a couple things. So I can use existing seams if I had UVs that I already had, but I don't. I can do by polygroup, which it's already all one polygroup, so I don't have to worry about that. Let's see. I thought that there was a thing to tell it to only do it in one island, but it does not. So what I'm going to want to do is enable control painting. And what this does is it allows me to basically paint a color where I want it to put the UV seam. It's not perfect. It's still just kind of a guess. So, but I can say like protect first and paint out this red on the entire face. And you paint it just like any other typical brush that you might use. I don't know why I can't paint this one poly here. It's being kind of weird. Maybe if I turn mask back. Okay. So I don't want any seams here, but I do want a seam right down the middle of the head in the back. So I'm going to do attract, and what this is doing is attracting the seam to that area. And now if I do an unwrap, it's going to take that into consideration, and let's see what we get. Okay, so it's still giving me some weird stuff. It moved it away a little bit. Again, for faces, you definitely want to do this stuff in ZBrush or in Maya or something else. You get a lot more control. You could start it in ZBrush, but it's it's just not going to give you the best layout. Let's protect again. I don't know. It just doesn't want to do it for some reason. Maybe if I go a little higher up the head with my attract, really try to make sure it puts it in the back. Unwrap. Let's see what that gave us. Okay, there we go. That's actually very good. So actually this you could pretty much bring into Maya and just kind of clean up a little bit. So that's the thing. ZBrush is kind of unpredictable. You don't quite know what you're going to get, and it looks like I did just get some random chunk down here for some reason. But it can be a good way to kind of get you started at least. So this is actually one of the best best that I've gotten for a face. It can totally do the trick for like if I load the Snow Girl model real quick. Where is she? Mikhail, ZBrush. Wait just a second. Come on. So like the scarf might not matter too much.
So something like this, I could maybe just do, you know, auto unwrap and see what I get. And you know, that's actually fine. That's all I need. You know, I can work with that and just scale it to where I need it in Maya. UV maps are included in an OBJ file if you have done the UV unwrap. So that will be stored, and that's how I always import all my UVs into ZBrush if they don't already have them. So yeah, like when you want to get a whole model into Maya into ZBrush from Maya, you basically just do that import thing that I showed at the beginning. So you'd like go to, let's load just like a star or whatever, and you're just gonna start importing one thing at a time. And that's why I always have like an OBJ folder, and I'm importing each of these things individually. It's kind of a slow process, which is unfortunate. There's probably better. There are quicker ways to do it that aren't necessarily better. Append. One thing you can do, technically, is you could just import. You could export everything from Maya as. Let's see here. As just one OBJ. Let me see if I can give you an example. Where's thought that I had. Let's see. No, what am I? I'm sorry, I'm kind of spacing out here. I guess example files is what I want. Okay. Yeah, so it might be easier just to select the whole object. It's going to store all the UVs with each object. You're going to go to Export Selection, export it as an OBJ. Send this to ZBrush folder, OBJ, Snowgirl, full. And then I could just go to, you know, so I have my star. I'm just going to import the, let's see, I'm going to import that character. She's not finished yet. So you see you get the whole thing, and by default, all the polygroups they come in as different polygroups. Because my normal angle was wrong on the foot, you see that that's reversed. But then I could just go and do group split. And I might have to actually still poly combine a few things, but that's actually not a bad way to do it. And you see all these are now separate pieces that I can work on. Yeah, so I think that about covers it for today. I'd be happy to go into more depth if anyone has any requests in the future. Or if you just want to see me do a sculpt, I can do a speed sculpt. I can work on one of my characters, you know, anything I'm happy to do. Maybe I can get into Topo Gun or something like that later. And probably this summer I'll be doing more streaming where I'm just going to be working on characters and models. So if you ever just want to see the process, I'm probably going to be doing that. They're going to probably be long videos. I'm not sure how I'm going to archive that stuff yet. But it is something that I want to do. I want to get a little bit better about maybe doing Story Expanse streaming or something like that. But yeah, thank you everyone who was able to join. This stuff will be up on YouTube hopefully today, maybe tomorrow, I'm not sure. I do have to get through a pretty good amount of grading now on the newest assignments, but that should be done this weekend as well. But yeah, if there's no more questions, I'm going to sign off in just a minute. I'll wait just another minute to see if anyone posts anything. Yeah, no problem. I'm happy to, that's why I do this, so happy to help. All right, thanks everybody. I will talk to everyone later.